This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible by Nyu-Media. We love us some Astro Port here on Bullet Heaven HD. So far, we've taken a look at a great many Astro Port games, and all of them, including Gigantic Army, Steel Strider, Armed 7, and Supercharged Robot Volkaiser, have been pretty fun examples of doujin games done very right, all the way down to the price.
Well, Astro Port is back with their latest in the form of the vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up Wolflame, making its way to Steam by way of publisher Nyu-Media. As one of Astro Port's few vertical scrollers, how does Wolflame shake things up? Let's take a closer look.
From a gameplay standpoint, Wolflame is as standard as it comes. It definitely harkens back to the days of Raiden and Kyukyoku Tiger, with extremely similar play mechanics. Players move their ship, called the Cybold, around the screen with typical 8-way control. Movement speed is brisk enough to avoid most attacks, but may seem a bit sluggish compared to a lot of modern vertical shooters.
Inputs also exist for the player's main shot, which is increased and supplemented by weapon pickups, as well as a bomb attack which destroys and damages enemies in addition to clearing bullets. Wolflame's simplicity makes it one that anyone can really dive into, and many different controllers can be used, thanks to the small amount of inputs required, as well as the lack of analog dependency.
The pickups dropped by specific enemies come in 3 flavors. Firstly, weapon pickups will cycle between red for machine guns and homing shots, green for piercing laser attacks, and blue for tracking lasers, all of which are also side-dependent, indicated by an arrow pointing either left or right. These satellites can not only be leveled up to a total level of 5, but also mixed and matched. Want a spread and homing shot on the left-hand side of your craft with a piercing laser on the right? No problem. Weapon level per side is also increased regardless of what color is picked up.
Bombs are also fairly liberally distributed throughout the 10 stages that Wolflame lasts for. This allows players to really get out of harm's way in a pinch, especially in later levels. These bombs are also pretty helpful in destroying stage and bosses in a pretty efficient manner. Knowing there are always several more coming in the next stage, players can make short work of the stage and bosses without much fear of not having a bomb or two in the next stage, just in case.
If players die though, something horrible happens. Yep, that's right, they're sent back to a checkpoint. We all hate checkpoints, and this game is no exception, but Wolflame does something pretty amazing with it. Defeating the first carrier enemy will drop a special pickup that will allow players to recover the weapon setup they had when they died. This only happens a certain amount of times though. Die too many times, and you'll be stuck building up your weapons all over again.
The gameplay on the whole is pretty fluid, but there are a couple of sticking points. Firstly, the player ship is pretty big, with no clear sense of where its hitbox is. Errant shots of varying size will often kill a player that thinks they can squeak through a decent-sized opening. Other times, they'll come out unscathed. The hitbox is definitely smaller than the ship, but we can't tell exactly how small. Center mass of the ship is the general idea, with the wings and nose being missable.
Not that it matters sometimes. Tanks and enemies with cannons attached will fling purple death at you faster than your eyes can make sense of it sometimes. On the whole, a player really needs to stay in motion almost constantly to avoid getting clipped. The same goes with some laser attacks. Charge times definitely vary and can sometimes lead to some cheap deaths.
With 10 stages, each being a fair length, another welcome feature of Wolflame is the save system. Players can save their progress as they make their way through the game. Super helpful, especially if your game time is run low or something else comes up. While the player's score is maintained, the game won't count it as a 1cc. That said, 10 stages also makes for a pretty satisfying experience, and a 1cc playthrough pretty much feels just right lengthwise.
Wolflame's gameplay is pretty tame on the whole, if you exclude the lightspeed cannon and laser shots, but it's also very fun and great for novices. Skilled players will have an easy time at a 1cc, especially with such accommodating extend scores. For players that want more, additional hard settings exist, which makes things considerably more challenging. Finally, Tate support for players with vertical monitors and the ability to fully customize the inputs in Wolflame rounds out the gameplay. Scoring in Wolflame is pretty simple. Shooting enemies makes up the bulk of the score in Wolflame without much in the line of bonuses to speak of. There's no combos to get in the way of the action, so it feels pretty pure, but also very weak by comparison to modern verts.
Collecting weapon power-ups when each respective side is at max power will also grant a 5,000 point bonus per pickup, regardless of if the weapon changes or not. This can lead to a decent score even mid-stage, which makes hitting the million point mark for an extend pretty easy every stage.
There are also medals that will appear when taking out ground-based crates. There are 2 different sizes to these medals, and both are tallied up at stage end. Small medals are worth 5,000 points, with larger ones worth 50,000 each. If a player dies though, all medals obtained are lost. Only the medals collected before defeating the stage end boss count. At game end, the player's life stock is also counted, with each worth 100,000 points apiece.
Wolflame also has online Steam leaderboards, allowing players to see how they stack up. It's all very straightforward, and of course, a 1cc with as many ships left in the stock as possible is going to get players the biggest payout. It's obviously nothing especially technical, of course, but pretty fun nonetheless.
Wolflame has a presentation that works well for its retro-inspired look and feel. Astro Port isn't much of a slouch when it comes to the presentation of their games, but in the past there have been sticking points and Wolflame is no exception.
Visually, Wolflame maintains the Astro Port status quo with the same kind of clear sprites and rotation-based animation on larger enemies as many of their previous titles. Explosions are well animated, especially in the case of many bosses, complete with rays of light and epic blast radius. As always, mechanical design is also top-notch.
Other visual touches like scorched earth, busted boss hulls, and more give players the sense that they're wreaking all kinds of major havoc. The only trouble with it all is that the visuals tend to get a bit blurry when played in full screen. With a default resolution of 480p, some of the cooler details almost fail to really pop. Despite this, some of the backdrops are pretty awesome, and the bomb effect is super sweet.
One neat thing that players have access to, though, is a variable window size. Just drag the corner out and let it go to the window size of your choosing when in window mode. Players also have the option of a full Tate mode as well, allowing players with vertical monitors the ability to play Wolflame without those pesky sidebars. The blast door borders do look cool though.
The sound is another typical foray into doens't territory. Most of Astro Port's games use exactly the same sound effects, and Wolflame is no exception. In fact, I can't seem to think of an effect that stands apart from something else they've done, which makes Wolflame sound far too samey for such a recent release.
The music is also mixed. While the composition is fine, there are issues with their looping points. Namely, the BGM tracks are brief and fade out in ways that make them feel quite lazy. This is kind of a downer because the BGM is actually pretty good stuff.
Rounding out the presentation is your typical Steam-related stuff. Achievements are fun, but fairly easy to get. We were able to achieve 94% of them in the time we spent capturing footage. There were times where we weren't able to trigger specific chivos, though, despite meeting the requirements. For example, the Shiny Pot of Gold achievement, which requires players to collect 20 medals in a single level, didn't trigger even when 21 were collected on multiple difficulties.
Steam trading cards also add a nice collectible edge to the game too, which is something we always love. So with solid retro gameplay and signature Astro Port presentation, just how does Wolflame stack up? Let's take a look.
Controlling the Cybold is as easy as it is typical.
Your ship's hitbox can be a little hard to gauge though.
Wolflame is pretty weak in terms of challenge by default.
Higher difficulties will need to be employed for veteran players.
For length, at 10 stages, there's a lot to play here.
Outside of scoring though, replay is kind of low, especially with such easy achievements.
Wolflame's visuals work just as well as any of Astro Port's other games. Mechanical design is a huge plus.
It's just too bad that the resolution is so low. Some backgrounds and the bomb effects look awesome though.
Sound-wise, Wolflame sound effects are nothing you haven't heard before.
The BGM tracks have bad looping as well, which kills the mood at times.
While the game at large is more or less stock and run-of-the-mill, the awesome recovery mechanic is something that more games, especially ones with checkpoints, should adopt.
The cool weapon systems are also pretty neat, even though they aren't especially unique. Mixing and matching weapons on either side of your ship is a nice touch.
Astro Port really can't do any wrong. Wolflame might be a little tame, a little rough around the edges, and a little old looking, but it works very, very well, especially for novices. Wolflame gets a 4 out of 5. As always, Nyu-Media has provided the goods for a very good price. You can get your copy of Wolflame on Steam today for about $6 US.